Cambodia's ancient grandeur was carved in the stones of Angkor, once the center of an empire that stretched across Southeast Asia. Hindu god kings had ruled a powerful state constantly at war with its neighbors. In the 15th century, the empire collapsed. Angkor was overrun and abandoned for more than 400 years. In 1960, the last king of Cambodia was cremated. His son, Prince Norodom Sihanouk. Sihanouk had been put on the throne by colonial France. After independence, he abdicated in favor of his father in order to play a more direct political role. Sihanouk remained chief of state and skillfully maneuvered to preserve his nation's neutrality. Cambodian folk dancers celebrated the country's abundance of rice and fish. Nearly 90% of all peasants owned their land. Cambodia prospered. Unlike Vietnam and Laos, it was at peace. To Cambodia's peasants, Sihanouk was almost divine. Many believed that he was even responsible for the success of their crops. Sihanouk relied on them, rather than on the urban population, for support. But Sihanouk's prestige and popularity could not change Cambodia's geography. In 1963, Sihanouk organized denunciations of America's growing involvement in Vietnam. He feared that the war would spread across his borders as South Vietnamese troops pursued the Viet Cong into Cambodia. He was willing to befriend any country or leader that he thought might assure Cambodia's survival. He formed a close relationship with China's Mao Zedong. He also courted leaders of non-aligned nations like Indonesia's President Sukarno. He strengthened his ties with France's President Charles de Gaulle. He also wrote, directed, and starred in his own feature films, all of them glorifying Cambodia. In 1966, Cambodia continued its carefree festivities despite growing dangers within the country and along its borders. Sihanouk had broken relations with America. His officers were becoming restless. Sihanouk was also beginning to face trouble in the countryside, where small groups of Cambodian communists, the Khmer Rouge, were recruiting some discontented peasants. Sihanouk continued to juggle. In 1967, he invited Jacqueline Kennedy to Cambodia, hoping to draw America's attention to his dilemma.
For my students, it's not for themselves.
Sihanouk was concerned by the Vietnamese communist buildup in the sanctuaries, and he feared a large-scale U.S. attack across his borders. As a counterbalance to this visit, he denounced America's Vietnam policy.
It would be immoral to support, your aggression, the aggression of the United States against the people of Vietnam. We want to have the right to continue to have the right to be united, to be free. And how could we deny to Vietnam the right to self-determination?
Pursuing their enemy, American and South Vietnamese aircraft often attacked across the Cambodian border. Sihanouk criticized Secretary of State Dean Rusk, who was then trying to repair relations.
There is a contradiction between the declaration of friendship and respect from Mr. Dean Rusk on one hand, and on the other hand, your forces in South Vietnam continue to come into Cambodia and to kill
what is necessary
our peasants and innocent civilian servants.
In 1969, newly elected President Nixon launched secret B-52 bombing raids over Cambodia against North Vietnamese and Viet Cong sanctuaries, driving them further into the country. Nixon neither informed Sihanouk nor sought his approval for this escalation.
We had many indirect evidences of Sihanouk's acquiescence in the bombing. Repeatedly, when he was asked at press conferences, he would say that, of course, he did not approve attacks on Cambodian territory, but he did not know what was going on in territory occupied by what he called the Viet Minh, which was the earlier name for the North Vietnamese sponsored guerrilla activity. He invited Nixon to visit Cambodia while the bombing was going on. He reestablished diplomatic relations with us.
I didn't know anything about the bombing when I went to Cambodia, and in fact I didn't know anything about it until after it broke in newspapers. For some reason I was never briefed on what was going on. I was aware of bombing, but not necessarily in Cambodia, because in my house on the banks of the Basak River at night, I not only could hear the bombing, but the whole house shook from the load of bombs when they were dropped, I assumed in Vietnam, but I suppose that eventually, most of them were being dropped in Cambodia.
In January 1970, Sihanouk departed for a vacation in France, a trip that would take him on to Moscow and Peking. He wanted help to curb the Vietnamese communist presence, which was arousing Cambodian hostility. In March, anti-communist officers unleashed mobs against the North Vietnamese and Viet Cong embassies in Phnom Penh. They demanded the expulsion of the Vietnamese communists.
I can say that some officers in our army and many deputies and many members of the government in Phnom Penh, they want to be your allies in order to have your dollars. They don't think about the destiny and the fate of our homeland. They don't mind about it. They are more patriots for dollars than for Cambodia.
A week later, Sihanouk's anti-communist opponents ousted him and issued orders for his execution. Sihanouk's former prime minister, General ONeill, led the new government, which promptly received secret American military aid.
Well, after the coup, and of course ONeill's government gave the Vietnamese, I think, 48 hours to get out, as I remember, there was wild enthusiasm in Phnom Penh itself. All the children from the schools turned out and enlisted and got weapons and went off to the front and that kind of thing. It was real enthusiasm.
Bravo.